Hello everybody, welcome to an edition of Koopa Fantasy. I am of course Koopa Fantasy. This is my Week 9 Sit-em Stardom suggestions for 2012-2013 NFL Fantasy Football season. You can find all my articles online at KoopaFantasy.com. That's K-O-O-P-A Fantasy.com. Follow me on Twitter at Blackie_Mike. I'm also Koopa Fantasy on there. And lastly, like, subscribe my videos, show them to your friends, all that stuff. It just goes a long way to help me out, guys. Let's get it right into it. My Week 9 Stardom suggestions for the 2012-2013 fantasy football season. Alright, guys. My stardom starts with Josh Freeman, Tampa Bay quarterback versus Oakland. He's had 3 consecutive 3-touchdown games coming into Week 9. In a matchup against Oakland, I think he could easily have another one. I'm not guaranteeing it, obviously, but I think against Oakland, who's allowed about 250 yards per game in the air, about 12 passing touchdowns, I can see him easily getting 250 yards with 2 to 3 touchdowns and possibly a 20-plus point fantasy effort again from Josh Freeman this week. My other quarterback, Matt Schaub versus Buffalo. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of Arian Foster, maybe some Ben Tate in this game. I think the Texans are good enough. They're going to be playing at home coming off the bye. They're just going to pour it on to Buffalo. And even if Arian Foster rushes for 2 touchdowns, I can see Matt Schaub throwing for 2 more. Maybe even 3 more. I think Andre Johnson is going to have a good game this week against a crappy Bills secondary. So I think Matt Schaub is a good play this week if you're looking for a quarterback to start. And finally, my third favorite quarterback for mid-range guys is Joe Flacco versus Cleveland. Definitely not as confident in him as I am in Freeman and Schaub, but against the division rival opponent, the Browns, and coming off a bye, same as Houston, I think the Ravens are going to be very, very hungry for a win. They're not going to want to lose to the Browns, who just had an ugly 7-6 win over the Chargers. And Flacco doesn't normally play well on the road, and Ray Rice could see a lot of work, but I think that the Browns have looked good enough that they're going to make this game a little competitive and force Flacco to still use his arm and possibly throw 30-plus times. On to the running backs. Same game, Trent Richardson versus Baltimore. Richardson's coming off a 100-yard game with a TD in a matchup he was supposed to be kind of hurt for. So against Baltimore, whose run defense is hugely struggling this year and now has lost Ray Lewis and whatnot, I think Trent Richardson obviously has a great matchup and could have a huge game against Baltimore. Detroit running back Michael LaSure has been a bit of a dud the past 4 weeks, but he's had 4 pretty rough matchups. He's had Chicago, Seattle, Philly, I forget what the other one was, but a couple of tough matchups for a running back. But against the Jacksonville this week, I'm pretty sure that Detroit's going to put up quite a few points, and I could see LaSure getting some decent yardage between the 20s and possibly getting a goal line carry. My biggest concern here is the use of Joique Bell and his potential to vulture some points, but I still like the matchup for Michael LaSure. And then for wide receivers, Deshaun Jackson, I usually like to choose this guy as a sit because he has so many dud weeks through the year. But I think after 3 dead weeks in a row, he's got the great opportunity to turn it on against New Orleans. I'm going to try to avoid using guys who play against New Orleans. You got to know this by now. If a team is playing against New Orleans, wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, they put up tons of points. It's a matchup to exploit each and every week. So Deshaun Jackson, despite how bad he's been and how hard he is to start week in, week out, I think this is the week you want to start the guy. And then Stevie Johnson, Buffalo wide receiver versus Houston. I think Buffalo's going to get killed in this game, which is going to force Ryan Fitzpatrick to throw about 40 times. And I'm thinking Stevie Johnson sees at least 10 targets in this game and possibly catches a touchdown as the Bills try desperately to keep pace with the Houston Texans. And then Brandon LaFell, Carolina wide receiver versus Washington. Again, another matchup you have to know to exploit by this point in the season. Tons of wide receivers and quarterbacks have had huge weeks against Washington. I think Brandon LaFell, coming off a decent week where he had about a 60-yard catch, he's poised for another big for his first really big week of the season. I'm thinking his first 100-yard game and hopefully a touchdown to go with it. And then finally, my tight end for the week is Owen Daniels versus Buffalo. Daniels has been one of the best tight ends in fantasy thus far, so hopefully you're starting this guy anyways. But against the Bills, I think Matt Schaub is going to hook up with this guy, hopefully for a touchdown. And my sit-em side of the list, guys. Let's get to it. Brandon Weeden versus Baltimore. I think this is going to be a lot of Trent Richardson since Baltimore doesn't stop the run very well this year. Weeden could have a good game. I'm not putting that out of realm of possibility. I just don't really like his odds this week against a divisional opponent coming off a bye in the Ravens. And then Christian Ponder. If you're looking for a one-week replacement and thinking about Ponder, I know I wouldn't. He's a very streaky quarterback and he's playing on the road against a very good defense. So avoid starting Ponder if he's a guy you have on your roster. And then for running backs, Chris Johnson's got a terrible matchup against Chicago. He's had a few weeks of semi-consistency after being a huge bust the first couple of weeks, but I think you want to put Johnson back on the bench this week unless you unless you really have no other better option. I just really don't like Chris Johnson's odds of having 100 yards or a touchdown this week. Maybe 100 total odds using his passing or catching some balls while using his legs. And then Indianapolis running backs Donald Brown and Vic Ballard versus Miami. If there was just one of them playing guaranteed, I might consider them a start. But since they're going to be splitting carries and playing a good rush defense in Miami, I don't think either one of them is going to really have a huge day. You might get a touchdown at a 1, which would give them, I guess, a decent enough value to start. But I just don't like the odds against a tough Miami team and having to split carries with each other. And it's kind of the same scenario for the next guys, Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller. Guys who normally are pretty good running backs, but they're even more talented than Brown and Ballard, obviously, but they have an even harder matchup against Houston, and they split carries. So I just don't really like either one of their chances to have a huge game individually. If I had to choose, though, I would go with Fred Jackson, obviously. And then for wide receivers, I don't like Miles Austin's chance of getting a TD for Dallas against Atlanta. Atlanta only gives up about 1 passing TD per week on average, and so I'm not really liking Miles Austin's chance. I think if someone grabs a TD for Dallas this week, it's probably going to be Dez Bryant with his big playability. And then Hakeem Nicks, New York Giants versus Pittsburgh. I was hoping for some points from Nicks last week. Didn't really get it. I think he only had about 30-some-odd yards. But Eli Manning and the whole team was pretty lame on the day, passing the ball despite the win. So as someone who really wants Nicks to get healthy and start having some big games again, I just don't see it happening against the Steelers, who are giving up like maybe 200 yards per game in the air, if not less, and not too many touchdowns to go with it. Maybe about 10 at most, maybe 11. And then Detroit, Titus Young versus Jacksonville. He's this guy. He's a player pickup of the week for me last week. He's a huge, lots of hype around this guy right now. Calvin Johnson's been a bit of a dud. Titus Young coming off a huge 2-touchdown week. I just don't see it happening again this week. I think against Jacksonville, Calvin Johnson is going to exploit them. They don't have anybody good enough to cover him. And I think Michael LaShore gets a lot of work. Same with Joique Bell, Calvin Johnson. I think those are the guys who have big games. I think Titus Young, as good as he is going to get relegated and see a bit fewer work than he has the last few weeks. And finally, my tight end to sit is an obvious choice. Michael Finley, having one of the biggest dud seasons of any tight end. He's playing hurt. He's admitted it many times. So if you have another tight end, I would suggest going with them this week and not expecting a lot from Michael Finley versus Arizona. All right, guys, that is it for my sit-em stardom for Week 9 of the 2012-2013 fantasy football season. I hope this stuff helps you out. If you want to read the article, go online, goodwithfantasy.com. Like, subscribe, my videos here on YouTube. That's awesome. On Twitter, Blackie_Mike. Hit me up on there. Follow me. Do whatever. Ask me questions. That's probably the easiest way to keep in touch with me is on Twitter. I'm very, very active on there. I usually answer questions within that same day or the next day at the latest, hopefully. That's about it, guys. Good with Fantasy signing out. Peace.